Hi, this is Paul. Just thought I'd make a maybe not a too long video. I am not streaming on Friday morning, so maybe we'll get Kale and Larry, and I'm sure the Pope talk will be all the talk, which again is itself an incredibly important piece in the video that I dropped yesterday about how in Vatican I you had Pope Pius the Ninth basically trying to stop modernity. But the irony was that if there's anything that has elevated the papacy to the heights of what we just saw today, it's modern information technology. The world watched the strangely fascinating yet archaic method of the color of smoke from a chimney. The world waited for smoke signals. Maybe we should say that. I have lived now through a variety of Roman Catholic papal successions, and I have to honestly say this is the first one I've ever paid any attention to at all. And that is probably not just the truth for me, because I have a YouTube channel and a whole bunch of Roman Catholic friends that I didn't have years ago. But it's amazing, just here, Jacob jumped on this in Jacob's Corner, and Julian was following this closely. Julian the Hutterite, and I wanted to hear from Father Eric. First point, we are doing our sense-making with each other like we already have, but the internet is facilitating it in new ways. And that is a hugely important thing. I was having earlier today, I was having a conversation on Zoom with some people, and we were talking about the fact that there's mass levels of Trump derangement syndrome in many of our family circles. And there's, short of an exorcism, there's sort of no getting around it. However you feel about Donald Trump, I didn't vote for him. He's not my favorite president. I don't think I have Trump derangement syndrome, but I see many people who do, because there's nothing they can talk about with more zest than Donald Trump. And now it seems that, at least for this moment, this is just here on Twitter, Pope Leo. This is the earliest Pope, Pope Leo the 13th, to be filmed. And just look at the context. As I was watching the Swiss Guard band, I was thinking, what a strange thing this is. Again, we are waiting for smoke signals via the internet. And here's Pope Leo the 13th in a carriage. You've got those pointy, spiky hats. You've got top hats, beaver top hats, robes. And so, and even, of course, Rerum Novarum, the encyclical that he wrote, and there are just very few cyclicals that this Protestant knows the name of, and as any indication of what they're about, he wrote that one. And of course, Michael Knowles over at Daily Wire was excited because he had predicted there'd be another Pope Leo, lion. It's a lion age. The lion age is coming. It sounds like astrology. People might make a little clip on Twitter about me making these associations, but it's what a strange time we're living in. Now, that wasn't even the most of it. So
Julian's, for anybody who's new around here, Julian's one of the old school members of Paul Vanderklay's channel.
Jacob stumbled. He didn't want to say the TLC. He didn't want to say this little corner. He didn't say the Peterson sphere.
And he's a Hutterite, believe it or not.
And for those of you who don't know, Hutterites are an element of Anabaptism that practice intentional community. If you would pull down his hoodie and he'd probably show his suspenders. And Julian was just following this closely. And I was just fascinated that here this Hutterite is following this closely. I don't want this video to be too long. That's going to be difficult for me. I want to at least make some points. So there's a fly in my office. I want to at least make some points that some perspectives on this in terms of what we're watching. Now, of course, the Jacob made the point to me that his people looked very quickly at his Twitter, feed, and mostly retweets, but everybody, of course, it caught the attention of this J.D. Vance's speech, response to it, and people are. I noticed that immediately the 3 words under his Twitter thing were, first of all, it wasn't Cardinal, it's Dr. Prevost, which is interesting, at Dr. Prevost, Católico Agostino Obispo. And I thought, interesting, Spanish place, Rome. So super interesting. He has this, now suddenly his followership spiked. He had 600 some at the beginning of the day or something like this, unless that was Dr. Drew Dick had sent that out. And people are sort of speculating as to where he is going to go and what he is going to do. And this Lance made this comment: Cardinal Prevost seems to be the very definition of what Larry warned about in one of his live streams. Now, this isn't Larry's take on the Cardinal, now the Pope. This is Lance's take on the Pope. Lance, of course, is now Orthodox, not Roman Catholic. But I thought Larry's framing was so good in terms of articulating sort of where modernist Christianity, secular modernist Christianity has sort of landed. And this is true, I think, of the mainline, and in some ways, perhaps this... Let me read it, and then I'll contextualize a little bit. Insofar as cardinals, lay people, and so forth have drank the Kool-Aid of modern secularity and its faux Christian values, insofar as they have done that, they have imbibed the de facto atheism. They have imbibed the nullification of God and have replaced traditional Catholic vision of things, eschatology, soteriology, with a new set of concepts and ideas that have been repackaged to sound Christian. But innately they are, in effect, a denial of the efficacy of grace, a denial of the realities of salvation, and that's why you see so many of them reducing the church to simply a philanthropic NGO. The church is only good insofar as it helps the immigrant and feeds the poor. The rest of all that doctrinal gobbledygook, who cares? I've been talking about the mainline church, and a lot of what happened in the mainline church. I had read a Substack of a mainliner who's Substack, and he basically talked about the fact that many churches, mainline churches, they've gotten to the point that they look at the building and they look at the costs of the episcopacy, of the leadership, and they've said, we can get rid of the buildings and the staff and the services and all of that, and we can just give the money to the poor. It's sort of a Judas take on the anointing of Jesus. We just give the money to the poor. Isn't that sort of the heart of everything? And I think Larry nicely says, if that is what Christianity gets reduced to, which in many ways is what it has been reduced to in terms of a secular frame, well, but in a Tom Holland world, of course, one could say, well, why is that the priority? Why are we ending suffering? And that's going to lead me into the other video that I want to make for tomorrow morning. So I have to keep this one moving so I have time to make that other video. So I have my council meeting tonight, yada, 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 yada. Tomorrow, again, I won't be live streaming because the puppy that I raised is going to graduate, and she is going to become a service animal for a very deserving human being. And I am super excited. I'm going to go to the ceremony. And I'm already tearing up, and I'm going to hand this dog over to her. And I'm going to cry like a baby on stage at some big box evangelical church in Santa Rosa tomorrow. That's what's going to happen. The church just lets the organization use it for their ceremonies. But this is very much where things are at. And this is sort of the landing the plane of secular modernity. Because at the bottom of this ride, people then ask, why is the runway here helping the poor? And of course, Tom Holland swoops in and says, that's because Jesus built that runway there. And Tom Holland, who, like many people younger than boomers, basically said, I'd really love Jesus to be more than just good health advice or relieving human suffering in physical ways. My first thought, people have asked me for my first thought. My first thought, and again, this is another little micro lesson in salience hierarchies, because this was not one of the names that had been named and had been sort of going around. My first thought was an American pope. That makes perfect sense. Why? Because the Vatican is in real financial distress. They have something like a 900 billion euro budget each year. And lately they've had about an 80 to 90 million dollar shortfall. And they figure that there's a $50 million structural deficit in the Vatican budget. So, well, obviously you want to balance that budget, but the main thing is going to be fundraising. And in my experience, in parachurch work, the big job for your chief executive officer is fundraising. And just being an American pope will raise millions of dollars for the Vatican. I'm completely... And people say, well, that's a cynical view. It's not a cynical view. I'm not saying that was the first importance. I'm not saying they overlooked other aspects of who he was. Many people have looked at this, and of course I have no idea. Many people have looked at this and said he's a continuation of Francis, which makes perfect sense. Most groups who have to look for a key leader will say, if they don't feel that a huge change of direction is needed, they'll pick a continuity person and a younger continuity person. And apparently he's worked at the Vatican for a number of years, so someone that they know, someone that they trust. The fact that he's American might be a little ways down the list, but it's a huge asset. Because if you think about where the money is in the world right now, number one is the United States, number two is China. You're not going to get a lot of money out of China. When you start looking at Roman Catholic countries, France is perhaps the next wealthiest down the list somewhere in terms of large, but 2023 numbers, GDP in billions, United States $27 trillion, GDP in per capita money, United States $82,000 per capita. Let's see if I can, next, China, 17 trillion. Yeah, you're not going to get a lot of money from China. Third, Germany. You'll get some from Germany, but the United States is 27 trillion, and Germany is 4. After Germany, Japan. Not going to get a lot of money from Japan. After that, India. Not going to get a lot of money from India. United Kingdom. There's some Catholics in the UK. 3.3 trillion. After that, France, 3 trillion. Italy, 2 trillion. In other words, if you've got money trouble and you're looking for someone who has the best chance of being the fundraiser in chief, and if you're looking at the amount of eyeballs and clout that the papacy now has via modern communication, an American pope is a no-brainer. It is just a no-brainer. Because the Vatican needs that money. And in all likelihood, if he's popular, it will raise ships. Now, Popular in what way? Popular to what people? Pope Francis was very popular in America among people who were generally sort of aligned with, let's say, exactly that element of religiosity, sort of the blue church cathedral element. It was very popular. Having someone in continuity with this, making arguments about the immigrant and the poor, while this will annoy some hardcore Catholics, they are a tiny percentage of the people. Now, they might be the people that are going to seminary and the people that are going to mass all the time and the people that are supporting their local parishes, but they are probably not the people in their 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s who have all of that disposable income, who can make huge tax-deductible contributions, and that is exactly the money that they need to go after. And I'm not saying it's cynical. I'm just saying every chief executive search I've been on in a not-for-profit, especially ecclesiastical operation, everybody understands that your point person is your chief fundraiser. And given the number of eyeballs on the papacy now and the pageantry and just how telegenic and social media worthy this whole thing is, they would be a fool to not pick an American at this time for the money that they need. And theologically, again, you can call me cynical, but I'm just saying, if I was a cardinal, I'm not saying it's at the top of their list, but you've got all of these things. Probably the first one that most of them said is, we want continuity. Okay, we want continuity. We want someone we can trust, someone we know well. Okay, he's worked in the Vatican. We want someone who can raise money. Where he speaks, he's from Chicago. Just going to Chicago. His first fundraising trip to Chicago will raise millions of dollars. It won't be called a fundraising trip, but him just going to Chicago will raise millions of dollars, and they need those dollars. And so, I know, call me cynical, whatever, but to me, it makes a world of sense. Very quickly, all of this hullabaloo will die down, and people will stop paying attention to him, and the amount of coverage that most normies in America who aren't Roman Catholic will hear will be about him maybe opposing Trump, maybe some gesture to some poor person. The theology won't matter. What will matter will be the images. So what will remain from Pope Francis's reign? Who am I to judge? Number one thing. Embracing that person, that disabled person, that will sort of be remembered. He will be remembered in very low resolution as someone who was kind to hurting people. This Pope will make the same noises, have the same gestures. Why? In the Christian Reformed Church, people who won't give to, let's say, support a foreign evangelistic missionary will give to help the hurting and the poor. Both sides of the church give that way. It's part of the reason in churches those messages are very reliable, because they're like no-lose messages in the American church, if framed in the proper way. So, congratulations. It's probably a great pick in terms of for the health of the Vatican, because one of the things that I came away from with my reading of Vatican I was that for all that Pius tried to do to hold back modernity, it was a near utter failure. The minority who lost in the ultramontane struggle in the 19th century basically won in the 20th century. Odds are good the conservatism that is bubbling up from below, at least in the West, with respect to Catholicism. And again, it's bubbling up in a particular way. It's the same thing we see in the Christian Reformed Church. It's bubbling up in that older people are no longer going to church. And when they die, the numbers of church attendance will go down, and then they'll hit a floor. And what that floor will be, all of those conservative people. And it's sort of like redeemed Zoomer strategy. Those conservative people will inherit the kingdom. Now, the question will be, how effective will those conservatives be in terms of evangelism in the long term? The current boomer papal regime will be popular with the boomer from whom they need to raise funds. But they will all go away, and so the conservatives' day will come. And will there be a Vatican III that will sort of turn the tide again on Vatican II? There might be, but it won't be like Vatican I. And so, to what degree will the Pope actually change the world? Context matters enormously. After I finished making the video yesterday, I thought, oh, there's something I really wanted to get in. I can get it in now because it's super germane. Long before Vatican I, the words monarchy and perfect society already had a long history in Catholic ecclesiology, and they reigned supreme at the time of the Council. Although they did not explicitly appear in Pastor Aeternus, the societal and political assumptions that they express pervade it. Those assumptions persist after Vatican I and even gain strength. But at Vatican II, the two words and the assumptions silently, unobtrusively, and utterly disappeared from sight. Think about that. Monarchy, perfect society. Buzzwords are holy words. Buzzwords in the 19th century pervade the big push of the document that they got through Vatican I that was going to hold back modernity. Didn't hold it back. As Patrick Granfield puts it, but Vatican II, the two words and the assumption silently, unobtrusively, and utterly disappeared from sight with profound results. A good example of change taking place simply through substitution and corporate memory loss. As Patrick Granfield put it, emphasis has shifted dramatically from the sociological to the biblical, from the jurisdictional to the sacramental, from the sectarian to the ecumenical, from the papal to the episcopal, from the hierarchical to the collegial. In other words, they won the battle in Vatican I just before the Pope became the prisoner of the Vatican, but they lost it in Vatican II. Now again, this young movement of conservative Catholics, will there be a Vatican III? And how will that turn? What words that are central to Vatican II in the 1960s will be lost, just like monarchy and perfect society were lost from the 19th century? There. That's good. I'll end it here.